difference being that for me, for example, that I don't have celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, this is an on and off, a quick on and off situation. So if I eat gluten and I release dissolvent because of this peptide in the gluten, my intestine becomes leak. I open this shortcut in between cells, gluten and God knows what else comes through. But on the other side of the barrier, there's this immune system that is doing the job right. See the enemy and clean the mess, and I don't have consequences. For people with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, there's a genetic background that make these people to mismanage this possible enemy. And therefore, you will eventually pay consequences. For celiac disease particularly, there's another problem. That while for me is on and off, for people with celiac disease, this activation of this zoning pathway is sustained. So you don't have just this open and close, but you have them open, and these doors got stuck over for a long time. So when you open the door, of course, everybody comes, not just gluten. So it is conceivable that other substances, other nutrients, bacterial products, whatever, they come through. And it is possible that, the associated conditions or other comorbidities like autoimmune disease and so on and so forth can be the consequence of this leaky gut that now allows everybody to come in. And again, on a specific genetic background, you can develop, a series of problems besides celiac disease.
Okay. Is that potentially one of the reasons why we see so many different manifestations, extraintestinal manifestations? Is this intestinal permeability, or do you think there are just other immune factors at play, or a combination?
Yeah, I'm a little bit biased here, but that will be my belief. And otherwise, I don't know how to explain the fact that despite the battlefield of this war is undisputably the gut, there is no organ or tissue that is spared. It can go that far to go to the brain. I have a way to say that the gut is not like Las Vegas. What up in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. So in other words, stuff comes in, you activate an immune system that is creating local inflammation because that's the battlefield. But these soldiers, they are the ones that eventually produce this inflammation, and therefore, the consequences that you see in the gut, they are not committed to stay there. These soldiers, the immune cells, may eventually start to move around. And depending what kind of, destination they would take. If they go to the joint, you can develop joint pain. Go to the skin, you can develop, typical rash, for example, dermatitis, piriformis. If you go to the brain, you can develop, behavioral changes. You can go through depression, anxiety, to schizophrenia, and so on, autism, and so on and so forth. So it really depends on the fact that once the levees are breached and stuff comes through, and the immune system is not tuned to do the job right, because it's genetically predisposed to mismanage this enemy, these soldiers who are armed, they go out of control. Okay? What nobody knows, and that will be an extremely interesting, concept to understand, is why, for you, for example, your soldiers, immune cells, would decide to go to the brain, and for me, would decide to go to the pancreas, so that you develop, let's say, depression, and I develop type 1 diabetes. Nobody knows. I mean, that would be quite an interesting finding to figure out how this is all played out.
I look at it much like a food, or a drug. If we give 1,000 people the same drug, we're going to get potentially a lot of different people reacting in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely.
So food, really not much different.
Absolutely.
Dr. Anderson and his group in Australia did some studies, and they recently, I want to say it was last July, discovered about 400 new unique gluten proteins that we didn't know about prior, and they found that 10% of these new proteins were immunoreactive, and the most immunoreactive, or the most immune inciting weren't the original gliadin that everybody says gliadin is this this major component or this major inciting factor for celiac disease. What are your thoughts on that research?
Well, again, this confirms once again that this is a weird protein. It will be very, very difficult to tackle the problem. Try to, for example, genetically engineer grains to make them not toxic. There are too many pieces of this protein that they are harmful for people with celiac disease. What is interesting that people start to map out these fragments. So Dr. Anderson found, a series of this, fragment that are immunoreactive. In other words, that makes, the immune system to go, out of control if you're genetically predisposed. But this same peptide can induce an immune reaction in anybody. There are other fragments that are cytotoxic, they kill the cells, and others that indeed make the intestine leak. Others that they produce chemokines, chemicals that attract, immune cells.